The original Wizardry Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord is one of the progenitors of the dungeon crawling genre, and even if it technically wasn't the first dungeon crawling video game, it undoubtedly made the framework that the majority of dungeon crawlers after it would use. And what is more impressive is that the game was made by just two guys still in university in 1981, Robert Woodhead and Andrew C. Greenberg. It is kind of amazing given its pioneer status how much it got right. The formula found within the first Wizardry game is still replicated today almost one for one. Entire game series are still being made that are, at their core, Wizardry clones, essentially using the same loop as the first game. And this is because Wizardry is just that smartly designed, with easy to understand and addicting gameplay, despite what its reputation of being an old, complicated dinosaur of a game may have you believe. The age of the original game's release, however, has been showing and for quite a while, though mostly in its presentation rather than its actual skeleton of gameplay. The dungeon's graphics are just white lines in a black void. The enemy sprites, while charming, are undeniably simple, and sometimes don't fit at all for what the enemy is supposed to be, and the UI is just unadorned lines of text and numbers. The first Wizardry has been remade before, such as the Lillegammen Saga on PS1, which also included Wizardry 2 and 3. But what we'll be looking at today is the most recent remake, released by Digital Eclipse in 2024, just simply bearing the name of the original. Wizardry Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord is my first actual old-school Wizardry. My only experience with this series before this was Wizardry 8, which is quite different to the original framework of the series, as well as the Japanese spin-offs. This remake impressed me so much, though, not just due to its advancements, but because it is literally just the original game, with some flourishes added to modernize it. In fact, it is such a faithful remake that the original game runs minimized on screen as you play. The game itself is mostly unchanged, and the changes that are included are, for the most part, tweakable. I do have experience with other dungeon crawlers though, and even some Wizardry clones, but my main takeaway, and one I'll keep championing, is how easily I fell into this game is impressive and shows how well this formula has aged. I'd expected the most archaic of systems, but it still feels so fresh and rewarding. If this was a new game release that had no ties to an old series, I would have still loved playing it. And while I would have considered a few choices strange, and noticed a few things missing, I would have still heralded it as a great game. Proving Grounds is very simple, and despite it technically having a story, I would argue that the game functions more as just a general adventure simulation, than something with a direct story. But just to set the scene that the game gives you, the Lord Trebor, who is named after one half of the dev duo Robert, his name just reversed, has had a special amulet stolen by an evil wizard named Werdna, who was similarly just named after Andrew, the other half of the dev duo. This Werdna has opened up a great dungeon beneath the castle town, and by Trebor's invitation, adventurers from all over are showing up to brave the dungeon. A couple of times, and I really do just mean a couple, Trebor communicates with the party to offer advice, and that is it for the story. There's no pre-made characters to talk to, no plot, no reason given for the amulet is special, or why Werdna took it, or is evil, or anything. There is just the Lord offering a reward, and an evil wizard to slay. This is one of the things that has aged the most about the game, and is also one of my complaints. When you, spoiler alert I guess, skip forward like a minute, when you beat Werdna, there isn't anything special that happens. You just get some money and XP, and you're told to head back in the dungeon to endlessly grind. This is awesome for having an endless dungeon crawler at your fingertips, but without any goal or big reward, it was still a bit of a whimper of an ending to a bare-bones story. I'm still glad that I completed the game. Doing so felt like an achievement, which is why it's so upsetting that the game itself doesn't really treat it as such. You don't even get, say, a splash of new artwork showing us handing over the amulet and being rewarded. Little things like this would have gone a long way to expanding the remake and adding a couple of new things to it while still not detracting from any of the core gameplay. I feel most modern people playing the game would have preferred there to at least be a story scene to finish off the adventure, or some unique characters to encounter in the town, even if it's just, say, a tavern keeper to talk to after runs in the dungeon, or a splash of art. Aside from the non-existent story and characters, there are a few mechanics that have aged very badly, but they can be toggled off. For instance, what I would say is the most controversial part of the game, aging, can be entirely disabled, which I will confess I did do. I don't really get anything from characters I spent time leveling and grinding to get older and weaker because I returned to town and rested. I feel this mechanic does and adds nothing. So having the option to tweak the game is very neat and welcome. The few archaic things being optional is the way to go, and the original players who enjoy CBT can enjoy their characters crumbling in front of their eyes, because they slept in an inn one too many a time. There are some other little options I think show the devs really gave a shit, like the ability to choose between the original computer version of the final floors, or the more refined console remake versions, so that both sides of the player base can have their preferred version. I went for the console version if you're curious, because it just makes the floors a bit more unique and expansive. Aside from these options, the remake adds plenty of nice flourishes and quality of life additions. For instance, having the choice to see the original game in the bottom right is very fun and a constant novelty, and it reminds you that you are truly playing the original game for the most part. In addition, there is a bestie area complete with the info on the enemies that you fight, though it has to be filled slowly over time as you identify more and more things about them. There is also a faster combat option to toggle that you will probably definitely want to be using by the end game. My absolute favorite thing, though, are the new designs and animations for the enemies. They are a joy to see every time you find a new one, and are still fun to watch hours into the game, and are a massive improvement over fighting a still, bare-bones JPEG of an enemy. These 3D models are awesome, and have such character to them. These new great designs also have charming and sometimes terrifying animations for various things. When they swing at you or cast a spell, hit or miss, flee from battle or fall asleep. These visual flourishes are needed in my opinion, and keep the game constantly engaging to look at, and very much modernizes it. Similarly, the UI is so much more refined, minimalist, pretty, and easy to navigate, for the most part. Switching items between party members was a bit like pulling teeth sometimes. Similar to the new graphics, the new music in the remake by composer Winifred Phillips is outstanding, and should be playing in the background of the video. Fellow YouTuber and dungeon crawler enthusiast, The Crawl, has a great video featuring Winifred on how the remake's music was made. Watching this video, her passion for the game and her music is infectious, and it made me appreciate the game on so many more levels. I would recommend that you watch it after this. Anyways. The gameplay of the Improving Grounds is honestly very simple, but that is all it needs to be, because it is stupidly addicting. I had fully expected to be pages upon pages of indecipherable numbers and weird spells, but it's very easy to understand, and things like leveling are essentially automatic. The game itself can be divided into 4 sections: character creation and leveling, exploration, combat, and lastly, the town. When you start the game, you are thrown directly into the town to make a group of party members, though you can choose to start with a pre-made party, or recruit people from the tavern for money. Characters can be made throughout the game freely, but always at level 1. Character creation itself is very easy, and clearly based after old school TTRPGs. You can either roll for character creation stat points, or take a standard amount to disperse as you want. These stat choices are your basic RPG things, with easy to understand descriptions of what they do, and they're also improved by which lineage that you pick: human, elf, dwarf, gnome, or halfling. Each of them clearly favoring one class with their basic stats. What stats you have after distributing the points determines what classes your character can be, though you can also change people's classes at any time back in town. Changing someone's class reverts them to level 1, but they keep their HP and spells. The 4 basic classes are Fighter, Mage, Priest, and Thief. If you choose to roll stats, it can also be possible to be a Bishop or Samurai right away, if you're lucky. These 2 are fittingly representative of a kind of multi-class, Bishops being a Priest and Mage hybrid, and Samurais being Fighter and Mage hybrids. But the base 4 classes, I figure, are fairly self-explanatory from their names, but I'll still give basic descriptions. Fighters are your frontliners, focused on solid physical damage and defense with the highest HP of any basic class. Most parties should probably start off with 3 fighters in the front lines. The party itself is split into front lines and back lines, 3 in both. and those in the front are more likely to be targeted, and those in the back less likely. The downside is, though, those in the back cannot melee attack, with the exception of the Thief, who, with an option toggled, can do a stealth attack, though they have to successfully take a turn to stealth before sneak attacking on their next turn. Similar to the 3 fighters being recommended, you should probably have one of each of the other classes. One priest, who are focused on healing your team as well as casting buffs, but also dispelling undead with very powerful attacks. A mage to have utility spells as well as heavily damaging ones, and a thief to identify and disarm traps. That's kind of all they're good for, actually. The game also has an alignment system, but all that it does is determine what classes they can be. For instance, thieves can only be neutral or evil. It is worth noting, though, that evil party members cannot work with good ones. Well, they can with an exploit, but if you're playing it legit, you would have to make one good party and one evil party. The good news is that the game constantly allows you to make and run new parties. In fact, it is entirely possible to lose your entire party and still play the game. There isn't a game over. If your first group dies, just make a new one. This is partially why I say the game almost feels like a dungeon crawler simulation, rather than a direct story to be told. You aren't a single character or even a single party. You can create and control as many as you want, like you're a guild master. Once your party is made, you can descend down to the dungeon, and experience the second part of the game, the exploration. The dungeon is explored tile by tile and is entirely pre-made. Nothing is random about its layout. As you explore, you fill a mini auto map, but the auto map actually resets every time you leave or re-enter the dungeon. Though, one of your party members can cast a spell to give you a view of where you are on the floor, and that can be pulled up at any time afterwards, but it will not show where you have moved since casting the spell. Most of these floors you'll be able to navigate by memory after hours of play, especially the first 2. And some can be very deceptive, feeling humongous when in actuality they can be crossed in just a few moments if you know where to go. Aside from basic floors, walls, and doors, there are hidden walls. Occasionally these hidden walls will shine, showing you where they are, and simply activating them will make a wall crumble away to reveal an entrance. These hidden doors, though, are sometimes only one way, and strand you on the far side of the floor in an area that you've never been in. Like the map, though, there is a spell you can cast to always have these secret walls glimmer, though I got by without using that spell for most of the game, just activating walls after seeing them glimmer, or feeling that I was in the right area and clicking on every wall that I went past. Occasionally as well, there will be puzzle doors, but they mostly boil down to finding a right item from a pedestal and then putting it on that door. The dungeon itself is very pretty, but as a complaint, I would have liked a bit more variety to the walls and floors. Getting to the lower parts is satisfying, since the walls do shift to a different design, but the majority of the game looks the same, but luckily less samey than just black and white lines. There are also dark areas that you have to navigate at first by just blind faith. There are still walls and even doors in this darkness. Again though, you'll begin to map these out in your mind. In particular, there was a very useful elevator that you find in one of these shadowed areas, and I learned quickly exactly where to turn the darkness to get to it every time. Lastly, there are some traps like floor pits you can come across, or even a pedestal to summon a unique boss. Eventually though, while walking through the dungeon, the third part of gameplay will show its head: combat. Almost all combat encounters are caused by a random encounter while exploring, and this is where the majority of the game takes place. Based on a roll, you can be surprised, giving the enemy a free round of attacks, but no spell casts. Likewise though, you can surprise them. The game is turn-based. Every party member and enemy rolls their initiative at the top of the turn, but their actions are determined all in one go, rather than every member choosing as their turn comes around. The actions themselves are very simple. Fighters will usually just have 2 options: a straight-up attack, or choosing to parry, raising their AC temporarily, making it harder to hit them. The back row will also be able to parry, sneak attack if they're a thief, or cast a spell or dispel undead. Spells are where the mid to end game damage really come into play. Your casters may feel very weak at first with only a small amount of spells and super low HP, but even by the mid game they can cast spells that will literally just insta-kill a party of enemies under a certain level with a single cast, sometimes over a dozen of them. You can also choose to identify enemies, learning more about them, their weaknesses, strengths, and even how often they appear in a group with other enemies. Going into the game, I expected combat to be hard and complex, but it actually isn't. That's not to say that the game isn't hard. It is, oftentimes, but the combat itself is arguably not that tactical. It is just knowing when to attack, what spells to use, and also when to flee. Fleeing can be done at any time, but has a chance to fail. But I encourage you, use it often. Getting out of a bad scenario is far better than being party wiped and having to make another group to come and save them. In combat, your armor and hit chance are the main things to worry about. Luckily, there are spells that can raise AC as well as they're to hit, and items too. Some enemies also have resistances to certain attacks. Some is basic but powerful as being nearly immune to magic, but very susceptible to melee attacks. This is a highly lethal game both ways. Very few enemies are tanky. Instead, you'll often have mashups of enemies who can kill you quickly, and you can kill them back quickly. Eventually, after leveling a bit though, you, more often than not, will be mowing through tons of enemies, just party after party of them. Getting your initiative higher, as well as your AC, is key, since those highly lethal enemies can't hit you anymore, but you can hit them. When getting powerful enough, some parties of enemies will encounter you and just try and leave rather than fight. Once combat is finished, the party gets some money and occasionally a treasure chest that the thief will identify and disarm traps on. Here you can find basic and enchanted items, ranging from basic +1 swords to dragon slaying equipment, to cursed items that slowly drain health. Eventually you must return to town, which is the final part of the gameplay equation. In the original game, this was just a series of words, but now we have a nice model with great artwork and relaxing music. Each of the buildings laid out and easy to find. I love hubs and homes in video games, so having visuals for this place is fantastic, and adds a really homey feeling to everything, especially with that relaxing music for the locations. And that's another reason I would have loved to have even just a splash of unique artwork showing the inside of these locations, or a unique NPC to talk to in them. Each building fulfills a specific purpose. If your party members die, which they often do, you can revive them at the temple for a quote-unquote donation. Though, is it really a donation when it's required? These temple donations start off reasonably priced at first, and then quickly become a king's ransom every time. Priest player characters will get the ability eventually to revive people in the dungeon, but it has a chance to fail, and not a rare one, reducing your dead party member to ashes. And ashes can only be revived at the temple for an even bigger fee. Even that can fail, which sadly happened to one of my characters. Just dead forever and my money taken. There are also status effects that enemies can put on you, like poison and paralysis, which can also be cured at the temple. But again, eventually your priest in the dungeon will be able to cure them on the spot, saving you a lot of money. There's also a trading post to buy basic items as well as some useful enchanted gear, which you should do. Definitely get your fighters basic helmets and other AC boosting items when you get the coin. There are also things like cure poison potions, which are very useful. You can also sell your items here and have enchanted ones identified. The identify fee, though, costs a lot of money, so I would recommend waiting until you can upgrade a party member to the bishop class, since bishops can freely identify your items, avoiding that crazy cost. The last few buildings in town are all kinda tied together. The inn is where you rest to recover HP and spell slots as well as level up. Leveling is an automatic affair for the most part, aside from the points that you put into your basic stats. Things like HP are automatically rolled, and similarly you don't pick your new spells, they're just added instantly to your character. An overabundance of spells has tainted some TTRPG and video game magic systems to me, so this was an appreciated part of the game. It was always exciting to have a spellcaster level up, because the spells are guaranteed to be useful, not having to worry about choosing a shit spell over a great one. The training grounds are where you either make a new player character, or manage your already made ones, dismissing them, changing their name and portrait, or changing their class, which I already described earlier, keeping your HP and spells, but reverting them back to level 1 as that new class. Lastly, there's the tavern, where your non-used characters stay, and you can also find new mercenaries to hire, for actually pretty reasonable amounts of money. This is where I got my bishop and samurai, and in the late game where you lose a party, it is very useful to have these hirelings to give you at least a small boost to leveling and trying to get back to your power levels. Best advice is just to level up a second party as you go, keeping one or two of your high level people in the party to help the weaker ones grind XP quicker, because this is a game that requires grinding all the time. The difficulty curve of this game I would say is easy at first, because you'll kill some low level things, get some XP, return to town to heal, and level pretty quickly. But when you push just a little bit further into the first floor, it immediately becomes hard. You will die very often due to coming across high level enemies and needing to go back and forth, grind the easier enemies. Then the difficulty sort of steadies out at a constant medium, being able to take on the enemies that once were hard fairly easily, especially if you stick to the floor that you last struggled at. But then bam, you go to the next floor and die immediately. Me myself literally losing my entire first party. All of them. It gutted me, of course, because I felt like I was smooth sailing, killing enemies constantly, and then we all died. I was kind of attached to them. Though they had no character, I was filling in character traits in my head, imagining how they were in the dungeon and back in the tavern. So I had to start from square one. Everyone else I'd spent time with dead. But once you know the rhythm, it makes that second party easier, and you feel that satisfying progression now somehow quickened. You know where to go, where the easier enemies are and the harder ones. You know when to return to town and rest, which enemies to run away from, and then come back and continue wiping the floors. You get more and more powerful. And then that second party has become powerful enough to take on the floor that wiped you before. And sure enough, there you are, killing the enemies that had merged your entire party. And then, feeling invigorated, you venture past that one point, and boom, you're slapped in the face, almost all your party members are dead, and you're having to run out of the dungeon praying that people won't kill you. Getting back to town, spending all your hard-earned money on reviving your party members. All of it now gone. This is the constant loop of the game. Easy, medium, easy, hard, easy, medium, easy, hard. But this makes it so satisfying, because you know eventually there will be something else to overcome. Another thing to be feared. But you also know that you'll be able to beat it. It'll become a part of that easy stage. Something that absolutely gutted me was I lost a very high level party on the floor just before the final one. I had to start over with my party at level 4s to 5s. These are my original party, funny enough, the ones that I had become so attached to and then put to the wayside. And then, after many more hours of grinding, I'd gotten them powerful enough to save my high-level party. Saving a party is a very annoying affair, though. You have to have empty slots in your party to bring the dead party members in, meaning you have to say, for instance, go in with only 3 people, half a normal party, to drag the other 3 back in those empty slots. As you can imagine, this is hard to do in a high-level area, especially doing it twice to get all 6 back. I lost some people fully. I also learned while reading that some people have lost their entire parties permanently due to the teleport spell. Because the teleport spell is a little weird. You choose the floor and then the literal coordinates where you want to go. But some of those coordinates can just be an empty wall with no floor, meaning that they literally just spawn to the wall and every one of them dies and can't be recovered. If that happened to me, I would have rage quit the game. I'm being honest, this wouldn't be a review. But I'm so glad I didn't quit when I lost both of my parties. It made for this engaging narrative in my head of differing groups, personalities, and rescue missions. My first party dying and being surpassed by a second group. After being rescued, they just stayed in the tavern, their morale lost and having to recover from their wounds. But then, the second group, working their way up to being legendary status, get to the very end only to die too. Making the original party, who had maybe even lost all faith in themselves, get back into action, and go and save those people who had once saved them, and even become better than them. To reflect the story in my mind, my final party that I killed Erdna with were a mix of members from both of these groups. It made for a super satisfying journey, even if the story wasn't a pre-made one for me. The story that I dynamically made through gameplay was all that I needed. And I'll probably remember that for years to come, far more than I would with some story with the Erdna being filled out more. So even though I do still have a little bit of a problem with the lack of story and characters, the truth is, you can still make some great stories here, and all it just takes is a little bit of imagination and perseverance. Wizardry Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord is the definition of it is all about the journey and not the destination. To the point of where the endgame is essentially built around just running the dungeon over and over again, leveling new parties from level 1. The plot is not at all a thing that matters. This game is instead a dungeon crawling simulation, where you make your own stories and attachment to these characters, losing some on the way, sometimes all of them. But you can still recover and get out an amazing win, and that's pretty great. I think the game is absolutely worth playing, if it wasn't clear. It holds up amazingly well, has plenty of wonderful enemies and sights to see, and has new tweaks to help the modern person to stick with the OG style. For a progenitor of the genre, it is wildly impressive, and the remake's focus on both quality of life, but also genuine, faithful emulation of the original is commendable. I hope you all enjoyed the video. A huge thank you to my patrons, the Kindred Eccentrics, Fred Gryson, and Mateo Feo, and a newcomer, the Wise Hermit, Kamihog Yuji. Thank you all so much for your generosity. It means the world and makes me feel like these videos are worthwhile. If anyone else wishes to join, check out my Patreon, which will be linked in the usual places. There are a few exclusive videos on there, as well as of course his personal thanks at the end of the video. As a final thank you, the YouTuber who I previously mentioned, The Crawl, has made me want to push myself to play more of these titans of the genre, even if I thought at first maybe too archaic. This has been your resident Eccentric, and I will see you again. Farewell.
A little bird told me that you've been asking around town about a resident Eccentric. I'd like to know why.